Welcome to the Sober by Design podcast, where we explore the many pathways to recovery and a better life through conversations with a wide array of guests. Whether you're sober curious, in recovery, or simply looking to improve your mental health and well-being, this podcast will have something for you. Each week, we sit down with inspiring guests from all walks of life who share their personal stories of struggle and triumph, offering valuable insights and practical advice on how to design a life worth living. From addiction and mental health to spirituality and creativity, we cover a wide range of topics that are relevant to anyone seeking to live a more fulfilling and authentic life. So join us on this journey of discovery, growth, and transformation, and start designing a new life. All right, everybody, welcome to the Sober by Design podcast. This is a first for me. I had recorded an episode with a guest, and we had a bit of a technical issue, or I did, I should say, on the transfer of the recording to my laptop. I don't know what happened exactly, but I dropped the first 3-4 minutes of our conversation. So I just wanted to jump on here and introduce the guest today. We are talking with Suki Jones. Suki's an author. She's just released a new memoir, See, Swallow Me, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and some local sellers out on the West Coast. She lives in the Bay Area, so her book is available, I believe, in some local shops around that locale, if you happen to find yourself in San Francisco. Suki, when we started out this conversation, we started out as we normally do, and we were talking a little bit about her early childhood, how she grew up, where she grew up. Suki grew up in the Midwest. She had a sort of a tumultuous, younger years. Her dad, she had kind of let us know that her dad was an alcoholic, sometimes violent, a very sort of, big man, and I think a big personality. Her and her mom were sort of back and forth to the West Coast, and then at some point had decided that it was time to up and get out of that household and relocate completely to the Bay Area and the West Coast. So she and her mother did leave again, I believe it when she was around 8, if memory serves correctly. And that is kind of where our story is going to pick up when we cut over to Suki. I'm going to do my best to tie it in and make sure that it makes some sense. The rest of the conversation is quite amazing, though, so please, know that there's a ton of stuff still discussed in this episode, and Suki has a lot of information and knowledge around recovery and is just an amazing person overall and has dedicated time, over her 26 years of recovery to helping others. And I think that is the message that I really took away from this time with her, that she's given back. She knows what she got through recovery, and she wants to share that with others. So please pick up on the next bit of this interview. And again, I'm really sorry for the technical issues. It was bound to happen at some point. I know it's happened on other podcasts, and when you're recording live and then transferring, it just stuff happens. So thanks for hanging in here, and stay on for the rest of the interview.
My mom and her lawyers got involved. I was sent back to California. So I was kind of going back and forth. And we were living with her parents. And at that time, my mom's father started sexually abusing me. So I kind of went from one situation that I didn't know how to handle to another situation that I didn't know how to handle. And it really, I think made, in the few years to come, like the early teen years, I think that made drugs and alcohol really appealing to me. Mm-hmm. And I believe that I was predisposed to like have those sort of inclinations anyway. So when I got into like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and drugs, alcohol, that sort of thing were like a thing, I dove in. Like I went all in. So
Okay, well, that's a lot there.
it is a lot.
So we went from early childhood Nebraska. Dad was obviously an alcoholic. You were coming up through that tumultuous time. Then you think you're getting out of it. You go west, and you kind of, out of the frying pan and into the fryer, for lack of a better,
Yeah.
terminology, right? Where you think it's going to go one direction, and it gets worse. So obviously, your childhood was full of, you know, big trauma, um, and that's hard to deal with as a kid. And even going up and through your teen years to have that kind of, weight on you. So what kind of comes out of that? Like, how do you start to cope with the world around you?
So early on, like in junior high, it was like I began like drinking.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was also like the kind of parent that, like, my mom's family's Dutch, and like they drank beer all day. Like it wasn't unusual to drink, like at my
Mm-hmm.
mom's family's home, to drink all day. Nobody thought about it, but were drinking beer, so it wasn't like my dad, throwing back scotch at 7 a.m. in the morning. It was viewed differently.
Sure.
Um, my mom would, kind of had the policy that if I was going to drink or if my friends were going to drink, she wanted us to do it at home. So she would, she actually would buy like wine coolers and or Heineken or like whatever for me and my friends
Mm-hmm.
if we agreed to stay in the house. So so I did, I took advantage of that, absolutely, and would, drink with friends of mine at my
Mm-hmm.
house. She was very anti-drug though, so like when I started experimenting with drugs, I had to be very secretive about it. And the I don't think I was using, I mean, I was using alcohol and drugs addictively at that age, but not to the point like where I would in the 90s, where, like where I was dope sick day in and day out
Okay.
and like, hungover day to day. It's a progressive illness. So like early on, it was a lot of fun early on, and it was a great coping skill for me to deal with the trauma that I had, but I wasn't addressing any of it. So, it came out in ways like me getting into like anorexia and bulimia, and not understanding why I was trying to control things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that in my life. Um, so it wasn't really until I was like 13, I think, and I got into therapy, and was like, oh, like I'm, like I'm trying to like kind of cover up all these issues with these different things. So that was an eye opener for me at that age.
Yeah, and I mean, for some of the listeners, like they might not understand too. Like you're talking middle school drinking, late '80s, like trying to set the
Yeah.
table of like what the culture was back then. It was different, right? Like
Yes.
how things were just a little bit different. Like it wasn't that. I don't think it was as abnormal, to be honest. Like it feels like it was a little bit more not culturally appropriate, but culturally acceptable, right? Like, and
Yeah.
it
More
was
relaxed.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look back at like Dazed and Confused or like any of those movies, right? It was kind of just part of what was going on. Like everybody kind of like winked away like a younger person going in and buying a six pack of beer. Like it was just kind of the thing. I think now
Yeah.
it's a little bit more frowned upon, but back then it was kind of like almost acceptable in a weird way. That's how I see it. I mean, I could be,
Yeah.
I don't know,
For
maybe I'm
sure.
wrong.
No, I totally agree, because there were absolutely times when I was like, 15, and you could go with your girlfriends or whatever and stand out in front of 7-Eleven and get somebody to buy you beer.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I don't think that's good anymore, but it
yeah.
wasn't unusual. Like that sort of thing wasn't, that wasn't out of the realm of possibility, and somebody eventually would. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could happen now. It feels very far from what's possible in the current climate. So That's just to set that table. So then you go from this alcohol use into drug use. And is that in high school that you start that, or?
It was junior high.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, junior high. I started. Uh, what happened was initially I was on a synchronized swimming team in junior high, and I had pulled a hamstring, and a doctor gave me a prescription for some narcotic medication. It was very like, like very low narcotic medication, but it was it, as soon as I took it, my body was like, oh, like, oh, this is what we like, like the feeling changed how I felt, or the feeling of taking that pill changed my outlook on things and made me feel differently. And, like I recognized it immediately. So, I started, my mom had kept these pills like up in a cabinet on like the top shelf. And like, I would start, getting into them, like, when I got home from school, she wasn't home from work yet. And then, eventually those pills ran out. But then I had friends that were doing like, angel dust and coke and smoking weed and, um, cross tops and Valium and, like had pills. So I kind of started experimenting with pills and drugs like in my early teens.
Mm-hmm.
And then that ramped up as I went into high school. But really, I just wanted to do anything that was going to kind of blot out the trauma.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what it was. Like if it changed my, like my feeling, if it gave me euphoria, if it took me out of my head, I just couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was.
Yeah, regulating the insides with the outside stuff, right? So like you're trying to
Yeah.
bring in anything, and you mentioned like food things, and so you were just doing anything to try to gain some sort of control over the feelings at that age. All the while though, you're in therapy. Is that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't there. Well, yeah, I was in therapy. I wasn't. So the thing about therapy is that, like, if you're not being honest with your therapist about what's going on, they can't really. He's not going to be able to help you. So, like, um, I still. My mom had no idea until it was like the summer before I went into high school. My mom had no idea about the sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
that had occurred with her father and I. And so we had moved the summer before high school, same town, but like, across town. And I had my diary stuffed in a box. I have no idea how she came across it, but she found it and she opened it and read it. And there in the pages, all was my, recounting and my record of like all these incidents with my grandfather. And I just remember being like her, I want to say confronting, but she didn't do it in a mean way. I just remember seeing her holding this composition book that I had with all these detailed things in it, and just like feeling like my soul had left my body, because I didn't want anyone to know about it, and I most certainly didn't want my mom to know about it. So as soon as I saw that book in her hand, I knew that like the jig was up. Like I had to tell her, I had to tell my therapist, like it was out.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a good thing. I mean, it was good to like, let that secret go. But it was hard too. Like that's just not an easy thing to have, like kind of be cornered and like be like, what is this? Did this happen?
Yeah.
So that was a lot, but I'm glad that it did, because who knows, I might have carried that secret with me all my life otherwise,
Right. Yeah, that's a big secret, and one that I think there's probably a lot of people that just carry secrets like that around forever,
Yeah.
and and take those to the grave, but through their life really struggle with it. And so while it probably was hard to go through that, and I'm sure it caused all sorts of rips and tears, and I can only imagine what the family dynamic was for a little bit. But it probably was the best thing to happen, right? Like that book just popping out. It was like
Yeah.
kind of the universe working in your favor in some way. Um, so, and then you mentioned something else in there that I think is really important. It's like people who go to therapy and don't tell the truth. I was just talking about this on another episode. It's kind of like going to the gym and staring at the treadmill. It's like you're kind of joking yourself. Like if you say like, "Hey, I'm going to therapy," and you go in there and just like lie or kind of be lazy about it. It's just like therapy is a very active thing, in my opinion, having been through a lot of it. And part of it is like telling the truth and then like taking that information that they give you and trying to put it into action and then seeing if it
Yes.
works, right?
Yeah.
So like there's this back
Yeah.
and forth in that room. And I think so many people go and maybe do parts and pieces and you know, but to get the most, it's like you got to go in there and be vulnerable and tell the truth and then be humble enough to come out and like try things that they suggest. And I found that over the years. It obviously wasn't like day one. I've been doing this for a while. And I think now it's starting to click, these things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it
my
takes
my
time, right?
therapist says that even he's like this is just this is not the work.
Now.
The real work is out there, like how you apply all this in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I just, I'm a big advocate of therapy and I just, as much as I can get that message out to people that listen, right? Like, it's like, you got to go out, you got to tell truth, you got to do the stuff. So anyway, that got a little off topic. So you're obviously still you're going into high school. Are things getting worse or better at this point for you? Like, are you
So
just sliding downhill or?
um so I right before the move happened, before my mom and I moved before high school, I had a physical altercation with my grandfather. And when I attacked him. So after that, he never tried anything again. He made a lot of threats at that point, like that he threatened to send me back to my dad.
Mm,
He made these threats, I think just to intimidate me and scare me, because he was probably afraid that I was gonna, like, oh, she's like standing up for herself. So, but of course, he never made good on any of the threats. So that had ended. And then high school, I didn't really do well in high school. I was a good student, but I had so much going on internally that I felt really out of place there. So I didn't go to school a lot. Like I skipped a lot, and then I ended up eventually dropping out
mm,
because I had some psychiatric holds at hospitals and that sort of thing. It was very hard. High school is hard.
mhm.
High school is hard anyway, and if you're dealing with trying to process that sort of trauma and try to just show up for first period and act like everything's normal and my life, let's do some math. Like I just couldn't reconcile those two worlds. Like I couldn't make them meet.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So, did you, I guess, well, when did you pull yourself out of that? Like, how old were you? And then what happened? Like, because, like, I had a brother who dropped out early. He got his GED. He then went off
Yeah.
he actually moved out to the Bay Area for a little bit.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And, so, like, what happened after you pulled yourself out of high school? Like, what does that look like for you?
So my mom was that was really rough on my mom, because like I was having terrible anxiety. Like I would want to go to school, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't make myself go. Like I just couldn't. I just wanted to be at home alone. Like I wanted to be home and process stuff and alone.
Yeah.
So when I when I had the discussion with my mom about like dropping out, like, I she was like, well, you're gonna have like a backup plan. I was also doing some like, like local modeling and stuff and TV shows, like local news magazine type thing. And so, and like my mom thought it was, I was like, I want to do like modeling and acting. And she was like, well, you can't do that. That's not going to work. And she was like, you need to have like a real thing to fall back on. So I agreed to go to beauty school.
Okay.
And so I dropped out of high school and did beauty school. And like I continued to party. Like that was like really like my focus. Like all I wanted to do really was like do drugs and drink, and like hang out with friends. And like, so that was really like that was my goal at all times, was just to be able to figure out how to do that all the time. I had 2 kids, and I worked at Tower Records for a while as a buyer, and managed a department at Tower Records for a while. And that was also a great place, like if you wanted to do drugs and like party, because like I had access to like, there were backstage passes, and like if you wanted tickets to anything, you could go. And so that was a great fit for me. I mean, probably not great for an alcoholic or addict, but I wasn't the only person that used the way that I used there.
Mm-hmm.
So I fit in, and it was music related, and I'm a big, huge music fan. So it was great. It was great for me, and probably not so great for me at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you had 2 kids, Tower Records,
Yeah.
beauty school, you're modeling. It sounds very much like lining up, like a little bit chaotic. I will say Tower Records was one of my favorite stores. It was a great store. Just as an aside
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I was very upset. There used to be when I was in grad school in Boston, there was a Tower Records right on the corner of Newbury Street in Boston, and I used to go there all the time. But yeah, so you're partying, you have kids. Obviously, things take a turn at some point, or maybe they don't. Maybe they don't take a turn. I don't know how your story plays out, but like at some point, is there a moment where you're like, this chaotic life is too much, or is there some big event, or is it just a culmination of all the events that lead you to your recovery?
There were some things like at the time, like I didn't see them as events that led me into like deeper into my addiction. But in hindsight, looking back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, those are definite landmarks.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was I had a 3rd pregnancy that I lost, and it was an ectopic pregnancy, and that was really hard because it was hard emotionally because like I was pregnant, I was gonna have a 3rd baby, and woke up in the hospital, like I hemorrhaged in the hospital, and like they called my priest, and like it was like it was scary. And so when I came to after the surgery, like I didn't know if I was still pregnant. I didn't know, but then I was, was in grief. Like I was grieving the loss of this child that like, wasn't a miscarriage. It was ectopic. So like, there's this added layer of like, nothing was wrong with that baby. It was me, like it was in the wrong place. Like, so even logically, when like, it's not something I did, like it still was like a hard thing to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very shortly after that. My kids were very little. They're pretty close in age. Anyway, my 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty soon after I had lost that baby, I had gone into my doctor, and he was like, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And I mentioned to him, just casually, wasn't at all fishing, but I mentioned that I was having headaches. periodically. And, like I was a young mom, like of course I'm having headaches,
Yeah.
like what young mom doesn't, but this particular doctor was like, oh, like, I can prescribe you codeine and Furoset. And I was like, immediately I was like, codeine?
Mm.
What? So as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, sure. Like, I had not used like during my pregnancies and was, pretty like clean living, like when my kids were very small. Um, and I really think I was like high on motherhood. Like I was like, I really, really wanted, like I was in love with being a new parent,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, and here's my doctor like offering it up to me on a silver platter, almost like, oh, like I'll give you these. And I was like, sure, great. So I very clearly, I remember where I filled I remember taking the prescription in. I remember waiting for it, picking it up and like looking at the little blue and white capsules and like taking one, when I was like, do I have a headache? I think I have a headache, like trying to justify a reason to take it.
Sure.
And as soon as I took that pill, something in me went, like it clicked, something triggered when I took that pill. Um, and then and then like I was never taking just one. Then I was taking two at a time. And then I was taking two at a time every, like, well, what does the bottle say? Okay, I can take one every 4 to 6 hours. I can take one, two every 4 hours because that's what it says I can do. And then eventually, like, you're taking, you know, two every 2 hours or, three every, like the increment starts to up for me, did it. And then it got to the point where I was, like chewing them up because I realized if I crunched them up and ate them, it would hit faster.
Hmm.
And, so I'm like burning through these pills and then like my prescription would be done in like 2 weeks and I'd have like 2 more weeks before I could fill it. And like, I would feel, I'm also have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I have mental health issues anyway. And when I would have those 2 weeks where I didn't have the codeine and Furoset, I felt awful. Like it was just like, I went from way up here to all of a sudden way down here. It was just like this roller coaster every month.
Mm-hmm.
And every month it was me trying to like spread them out more and trying to like, I'm only going to take 3 today, or I'm only going to, like, I'm trying to like, trick myself into taking less, hiding them places, and like, just all these things that you do to try to control your using. And I mean, that was a huge secret. Like nobody knew that I was using that much. Like I would give them, and then I'd get like a new prescription and I'd be like, like I'd want to share them with friends. And then I'd be like, oh my God, why did I do that? I gave like 2 or 3 to that person. Like, why did I do that? But eventually, like as my kids got into like closer to preschool age and I was running through my prescription, like as they got a little older and my use increased, like I was like, be dropping them off and then I'd be like doctor shopping all day.
Mm.
And like, like going from, doctor to doctor. And then, I had friends, my friends were young and I was like the only one with kids. And so like, I would be like, oh, I have these, like, do you want to trade these? Like, or I had Valium at this point also, like they were giving me Valium. And so I would, get a whole bottle of Valium and I'd be like, I'll give you my whole bottle of Valium for all your Vicodin. Or, like I was trading off with people. So, eventually even the Vicodin, like I'd buy like somebody's 60 days supply of Vicodin and then burn through those and my own prescription. And then, and then what do? What do you do when you are out of all those? And you doctor shopped and you're like, oh, what other doctor, how far can I drive? Like, like, well, before I have to pick up my kids and, and you're spending money too doing this. And trying to budget your time and your money and your energy and your life. And it's chaotic. Like
Yeah.
chaotic is a great word for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's not my story, but I've seen that story from, people in my sphere, and it's chaos. And it tumbles out quick, right? It's like got a real I mean, anybody's sort of substance use tumbles out fast. Not to
Mm-hmm.
discount like anybody who drinks or anything like that, right? Like even, we know like food stuff, or any of this stuff just like tumbles out quickly, right? So as
Yeah.
soon as somebody's really in it, it's like it has a blast radius, and
That's
uh
such a good way to describe it. A blast radius.
right?
I love that.
Yeah, it's and like it gets a lot of people. And I know in my family it got people, mine, and then also other people in my family, and then I see friends, and so I'm sure that you saw that happening. Um, what? So you obviously were having a hard time getting pills. Did you go to the next step and start to find street drugs to supplement? Yeah,
Yes.
okay, because that's the
Absolutely.
yes.
Because my friends, because I was younger when I had my kids, and like my friends, like especially like my Tower Records friends, and like friends that like were like music in bands and stuff like that. Like they knew where to get drugs, and like like there would be different drugs that would kind of trend through the scene, and I would try them all. So it got to a point where somebody would be like, oh, like we got some crack, or we got some speed or coke, or somebody had a bottle of like Tylox, or like some sort of like opiate,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would buy those, or coke, or like whatever I could get. And so it progressed to when like in the 90s, heroin made a huge resurgence. Like it was very popular,
Mm-hmm.
and as soon as that started to circulate in my group of friends, like I wanted, I knew, even like not ever having tried it, I knew I wanted to do it. Like I was like, I absolutely want to do that. um, and so at the first availability, I did. So and that progressed. Like if like once I had that, it was like occasionally I was doing heroin and coke, and then it was like just on the weekends, and then like it was like, oh, maybe at night, and then
Mm-hmm.
on the weekends, and then you're doing it every day. So uh and that is a whole other level of chaos, because I'm still doctor shopping. I'm still doing all the other things too,
Right.
because I can't get enough of. I mean, like, because just heroin and just coke and just drinking isn't enough. Like, I need the pills too, because like if I can't get the heroin one morning before I have to take the kids somewhere, or like I need to have all of it all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and somebody might go like that sounds impossible, but I find that people who have a real bad addiction to anything can figure it out, right? Like
absolutely.
somebody's probably going like I wouldn't have time to do that. It's like no, you could have the time to
You'd be
do it.
surprised.
Yeah, like somehow they, when you're in active addiction, you find extra hours. Um,
Hmm.
you know, and part of that is true. Like you're probably staying up later. There is just extra hours, right? You're always kind of running right at the edge of your ability to like survive, and it's a very it's an incredibly challenging way to live. I know that I don't miss it at all. One thing that I'll say is, you're saying like heroin was big in the '90s, and I know it was, but I think that was, and I don't know because it wasn't my world at the time, but I feel like it was a little bit more West Coast based still at that time. Like on the East Coast, it definitely felt more like crack. And maybe that was specifically where I was, right? Like I had
Yeah.
roommates in college that were crack addicts, and There was a lot of like the rave party drugs going, like ecstasy was huge and
Yes, yeah.
Vicodin and then Coke because of New York. It
Hmm.
seemed like, New York was just sort of tied to Coke. And that seemed to be the scene. I know there was people doing heroin, but I don't think it had the hold on this area quite yet that it might have had in the West and then the Northwest. Like that
Yeah,
feels
for
like
sure.
it was
Yeah,
maybe like a little bit of a divide, right? And that is true still. Like there's drugs that are just more popular, or for lack of a better term, in different areas.
yeah,
Where now like heroin is like so widespread and like so well known as like a major problem, and I think because of the opiate uh, and like all the press that it's gotten. Um, anyway,
yeah.
so you know, I don't want to like fast forward the story, but like, what was the thing that brought you to find recovery? Like, what was the moment in time? Like, there's some straw that broke the back. What was it
Yeah,
for you?
I mean, for me, um, I had terrible guilt about being a parent
Mm,
and using and about having like paraphernalia in the house or just having heroin in the house or my kids finding it and I had terrible guilt about it. So I was really afraid. Like I was having like health consequences from it. Like there were a string of like hospital related stays that or visits that were because of my drug use,
mhm,
and that was scary for me um, because I was afraid that like I was gonna like that my kids were gonna end up without a mother. So that was very scary. I also had been seeing someone that I was using with, and they died,
mm,
and so that was really hard on me, and uh, that was one of the hardest things. Like I loved him a lot, and so that was a very hard thing to process. And then like there were friends of mine that were having it was consequences around me that were happening. I had a friend that was killed execution style in a drug deal, and like things like that, where like where you feel like ooh, like that could have been me,
mhm,
like it was getting closer and closer and closer. And every time that something happened to, like a friend of mine or somebody that was close to me, or, like somebody dying or ODing or whatever, like all of these things that kept getting closer and closer. Um, I felt like eventually my card was going to get pulled. Like it hadn't happened yet. Like I'd had some very close calls, and or like times that my kids like found me on the floor. My son and daughter have talked to me about this one particular time where they could not wake me,
mm,
and like how my son has said like I was really that really scared me. He's like I can remember like it was yesterday, and I'm like, and I remember the incident, but like it was like so there's two ways, like as a parent for me, like I see that two ways. You can have so much guilt from that sort of thing happening
mhm.
that you're just like I just can't, like I give up, like, and you just kind of surrender to the addiction and just like let go, just let go of any idea of getting better. Or there's this other side of it where you're like, oh my god, like I have to find a way out of this. Like like you're just like desperate to find a way out. And for me, like I had run into a friend of mine that was in my circle of friends at a memorial service, and she had gotten sober
Mhm.
like six months before the memorial service, or a few months, I guess, before the memorial service. And I kept running into her. And so she kept implanting the idea of recovery in my head. So that was really like I didn't really think that like 12-step programs or, like I didn't think recovery would, I thought I was kind of doomed
Mhm.
because I didn't see it work with my dad, so I was like, this is, like how do I possibly pull myself out of this?
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, it's good that your friend didn't give up. You
yes,
know, she
yes.
kept going on you. So did you finally like? I know that you're saying, "Hey, it didn't work for my dad." Obviously, you're here today because something worked for you. What was the thing that stuck? Was it 12 step? Was it NA? Was it AA? Was it some version of that, or was it something else?
It was, I would say it's a combination of things.
Okay.
When I got sober, I was dating someone. We were using together. I was with somebody that was also, we were using, you know, as a couple,
Yeah.
and which is, like that's a tough place, because you're both, focused on your own addiction. So like, how healthy is your relationship going to be? Like, all you care about is getting high, and like, so when you have two people together and each of them only cares about like their own wellness and how they're going to make it through the day, like that's a whole recipe for disaster. But he and I had tried to kick a number of times unsuccessfully, and we had, like, we like, okay, this weekend, okay, tomorrow, last day, not this is the last time we're going out, this is it. And I don't even know why maybe somebody that we knew had gone on methadone. I don't remember exactly why he's looked into it, but he looked into methadone treatment in around Oakland, where I lived, and
Hmm.
so he was like, I think we should try methadone. I was like, what? Like, I didn't know anything about it, and I was like, like, how does that help anything? Like, I didn't understand what it was.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that methadone was a big part of my recovery. Like, it gave me enough space to get away from just the act of using every day and the cycle of it, the ritual of it. Like, it gave me enough distance from it that I was able to breathe and just see what a normal life looked like, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, so while I was on methadone, I started checking out 12 step meetings. My friend had given me like a list of recommended. She was like, "Oh, go to this one, this one, this one. Like, this one's good." Like, and so eventually I caved, and she had offered, I think, to go with me, and I think I was too nervous to go with her. Like, I just didn't know what to expect, really. Like, I didn't know. I wanted to leave if I wanted to, or not be like, like, have to do it.
Hmm.
So I went to a meeting by myself, and I heard somebody share a story similar enough to mine that I stayed. Well, actually, I tried to leave halfway through, and somebody came out from the meeting and was like, "Hey, why don't you come back in and just stay for the rest of the meeting?" And I was like, "God damn it, okay." But in the end of that meeting, I heard what I needed to hear. Like, I heard somebody, like, I lost it. I
Hmm.
completely lost it. Like, I was sitting there like, oh, like, this is, like, this isn't gonna work. God, I can't wait till I can leave. Like, I can't believe I went back in here. And then I'm listening to this woman, and I'm like, oh my God. And like, the tears just came.
Yeah.
Could not stop crying.
Yeah. I mean, the rooms have a lot of people, right? Well, depends what room you go into, but there's people there,
Yes.
and everybody that goes into them at the start, I think, feels very unique, right? Like, they're not gonna relate to anybody in that room that their story's so different than everybody else's. There's no way. And then if you go to enough, you're gonna find somebody that hits you. Like, you found it in the first meeting, and I know I heard plenty of stories that resonated with me. And that's kind of a little bit of the power of it. I don't go anymore. I credit it to my early recovery. Um, there's a power in the community. There's a power in those stories that can help people kind of recalibrate their brain, right? Like, hey, I'm not really this unicorn in the world that is so unique that I can never be fixed. It's like, no, there's like hundreds and thousands and millions of people just like me that have figured out how to do it without substances. And I think that is some of the magic sauce there. That's how I see it, but maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's totally true. Like that is the magic sauce. Like it for me also, like I had this idea that 12 step was going to look like my dad, like
Mm-hmm.
that it was going to, I mean, not that there aren't meetings that are older white men, but but I thought like it was going to be a bunch of like grouchy dudes like
Mm-hmm.
sitting around and like, I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of pictured it. And when I walked in the room, it was like punk rock kids and like, like it was like people that I would hang out with. And I was like, what? Like
Yeah.
it kind of blew me away, that these were my people.
Mm-hmm.
Like what? They're how are you here? It is really a magical thing. And like um the beauty of that also is that like they wouldn't leave me alone. Like they were like hell bent on me, like on like me being okay, and they made sure I was okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole story is pretty interesting too. Just to step back a minute, you went to with methadone and you talked about it, breaking the ritual, and I've talked about medical assisted, treatment on here, and I there are some very strong opinions about Matt, and
Yeah.
I work in, well, not anymore, but I was working in a recovery center down the road, and we are advocates of all sorts of modalities and treatments, and we recommend it for people, right? There's Suboxone, there's methadone, there's places locally. Um, when I talk about it with people, I think that the key is that you're doing that and then going to NA or AA, and that's exactly what you did, right? It's not like a either or. It's like it's an
Right.
and, right? And I think that you have to be doing something else because it can, like, you saw it for what it was. It's like it kind of got you out of that routine. It got you out of the high of like going to get the drug and like all those like
Yeah.
little things, right? That's part of the whole experience. You broke that part out and you're like, okay, that's gone. This is just helping me physically. Now I need to get right mentally. And like you put them
Yeah.
together, which is like the key.
Yeah.
And it set you on a path. So how long did you stay with the NA? Are you still there? Are you?
I'm still. I wanted to touch those things as you were saying that. I was like, it is not unlike what my psychologist says. Like with the methadone, it
Mm,
is not like the work happens outside.
yeah,
Like the methadone like did something to like kind of grease the wheels and
sure.
like give me space, but the work that I did from being uh, on in a methadone treatment, at the clinic was just to help.
Yeah,
So I think that's a great point.
it like
You
it
know,
opened you up to be able to like take that in, right? Because like without
yes,
that,
yeah,
you wouldn't have been able to even like mentally think about
get to
that
the
stuff,
next point.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
like, and then now you're working on the stuff where like you can now say, okay, I don't need the thing to like help me regulate my insides anymore. And that's kind of where you want to get to, because I say it all the time on here, like there's always something to regulate your insides. Like I know when
yes,
I'm off, like I eat poorly now. Like there's things that I do to cover when I'm feeling bad
yeah,
inside. Um because I'm not perfect. I am not like fully recovered yet, right? I'm in recovery. So I'm like still working, and I talk about that too, like just better the next day. And for me, like it is like I'll eat ice cream, I'll eat cookies, like that's how I'll kind of cope with it. Not like over the top, but enough to go like I had a bad day. this cookie will help, you know, like,
Yes.
but I know what that is,
100%.
right? I know what that is. I'm not
Yeah.
silly, like, but I think being able to recognize it is key. And I think some of the work that you've done, that I've done, that others in recovery have done, like we can now see that for what it is. And that's the stuff that comes out of being able to like focus in those meetings, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
you still go now or you're,
I do.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I do. I do it. I do more. It's funny because I did primarily NA in the beginning, and then it switched. I've always been kind of like bisexual, like where I've done like NA and AA.
Yeah.
But like at some point it switched over where like AA just felt like a better fit for me.
Okay.
And like I always like to tell like newcomers or sponsees, that like your program will change as you change. Like your what you need for your recovery will change over time, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. Like that means you're growing. Like I do different things. I do alternative recovery. Like all meetings online that aren't necessarily 12 step, but
Mm-hmm.
are, like 12 step in, like in idea,
Yeah,
sort
they're
of,
just adjacent. The smart
yeah,
meetings, refuge,
adjacent. Yes.
noble. Yeah, there's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, so I'm very open to like, if I'm growing as a person by doing that and, and I'm progressing in my recovery and and I'm feeling good about what I'm doing, then I keep doing it.
yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. There are so many options. There's so many things you can do today.
There are, and with I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic was the fact that so many of these meetings just went online, right? Like before it
Yes.
was kind of like not really a thing, and there are some like challenges around that. I get it, like with the anonymity and people popping in and out of rooms, and but I think most of that kind of died out early on in the pandemic, and then it's all kind of worked out. But yeah, you can go to a meeting almost all day, every day online.
Yes.
You know,
Anywhere.
yeah, anywhere.
I've been to meetings in Iceland
Yeah.
and like England, and
Yeah, different
it's great.
languages. Yeah, because like,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, sometimes you get somebody who's maybe not like, this is something that I found working with people. It's like I didn't understand like some people don't speak fluent English, some people don't have cars. Like there's all these challenges and then all of a sudden like this happened and it opened up that world. So, hey, that was one of the positives of that little weird time that we all went through a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know you do a lot of other stuff too. Like you've written your book, but you're active in your community in other ways around recovery. I think something, and I'm not 100% sure, is it Needle
I've
Exchange
worked with the
or
Needle
yeah, okay,
Exchange. Yeah, and I sit on a board for a harm reduction and treatment
okay,
center,
yeah,
and I'm very proactive about like making sure people have Narcan, making sure people have access to clean needles, and like all of that sort of thing. And because I'm so grateful like that it exists, and like I'm so glad that people have that today, is have that available to them.
mm-hmm,
I mean, there was a little, that was available a little bit like when I was still out there, but it was kind of like people like out of vans, like,
mm-hmm,
hey, get your clean needles here. And now like there's like whole places like like churches and just centers where people can get clean using supplies and testing kits and Narcan and all of it.
yeah.
So it's really important to me
No, I
and
think
dear to my heart.
it is super important, and I think you have a point. Like it used to be in vans, it was back alley, it was hidden, it was sort of like a dirty secret. And I don't understand that. Even AA meetings were kind of like weird and like you know, behind the church, right? Like everything
Yes,
was so
yeah,
like,
in the basement.
yeah. And now it's kind of like out there, and you'd mentioned before, like it was angry dudes, and listen, there's still plenty of those angry dudes, and
Yes,
and
yeah,
and I
it's
think
true.
that they don't do. I have a whole philosophy on that, right? Like I feel like it kind of turns off people, and it's kind of got to flip, and I think it's getting there. Um, I don't know how to fully flip it, but it is flipping. Um, but harm reduction, you mentioned harm reduction, and it's something that we talk about here. I've talked about it a couple of times, and I think so. Um, it's still new. Like, if you mention that in an AA room or NA room, you might get like a real blowback, right? Like, the way I see harm reduction is like, we talk about it at my previous work. It's like, that could literally be like an alcoholic calling for an Uber rather than
Yes. Yeah.
driving, right? And if I said that in an AA meeting, somebody would lose their mind, right? But like to them, that is a huge step towards something better, right? Like they're
Yeah.
not going to kill themselves, they're not going to kill somebody else. Like, getting clean needles. It's like that is a huge step forward if somebody can't stop using, right? Like they've
Yes.
they've
Yeah.
eliminated all this possible bad outcome, and it's a step in the right direction, right? It's like you can't do it all like right off the bat. I mean, you saw that too, and so I think opening that world up and really sort of saying to people like it's okay to just try harm reduction as a start. It's like the more that gets sort of mainstreamed, I think the better. That's how I
Yeah.
see it. And I don't
Yeah.
know that I would have had that
Absolutely.
view 10 years ago. In all honesty, 10 years ago, I don't think I would have been there. Um,
Oh wow. Really?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because like for me, 10 years ago, it was such a binary choice. It was like, well, 11 years ago, whatever. When I got sober, it was like I was either going to be drinking or not drinking, right? Like
Oh, gotcha.
there was
Okay.
no in between for me. Like it
Yeah.
was
No gray area.
no, no, because like just for me in my case, like calling an Uber to get home from the bar still would have had all these other outcomes that were the issue that I was dealing with, right? So for me, it was so binary. Um,
Hmm.
but maybe looking back, and if I had done that, maybe those other issues wouldn't have existed. So like I don't know, like it's just, it, I think the more mainstream we could get it, and the more open we are to talk about things like that, the better. Because maybe it would have been the right solution for me, and maybe I would have been able to find my recovery sooner. Who knows? It's like
Yeah.
can't go backwards in time. Um,
Yeah.
so what do you like to do in your free time now that you have, I think 23 years? So is that,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a long
Yeah.
time. So for 23 years, you've been doing a lot of stuff. What do you do for fun? Like, what does your life look like on the fun side now?
On the fun side, I'm really into I love music. I love reading. I love art, and I spend a lot of time with my kids, and we're very close. And yeah, like for me, like a good day is like reading, doing a little art, and going for like a long hike and
Okay.
listening to some music or podcasts. Like that's pretty much, and like maybe some ice cream also.
Okay. All right. So you've kind of settled in. You're like, okay, I just want calm, quiet, right? Like that's kind
Yes,
of what it
yeah,
is. All right. I
yeah.
like it. I
I've
like
always
it.
got some writing project going. I'm working on like three different things right now, but
Okay.
that falls into like the creative
Yeah.
part of my day. Yeah.
And professionally, where are you settled? Are you still doing acting or anything of that
I
nature?
haven't done well. Let's see. I did model. I did some modeling a couple of years ago, like
Okay.
right, like pandemic-y. I did for a local dress brand. Um, but yeah, I haven't done any acting or modeling like
Okay.
really for a long while. But yeah, I stay busy like doing like side gigs
Yeah.
that can support my writing.
There you go.
Is like I try to do something so that I have enough time. Like I'm like I need to pay the bills, but also be able to write.
Yeah. No, listen, if it's the passion, that's the thing that you got to focus on, right?
Yeah,
That is, it's always, if you can do what you love, the money follows is kind of
yeah,
what I think the magic is, right? If you can really do what you love. Um, I've seen some people really make it work. So
yeah,
just keep following that passion.
yes.
Um, I know that like we're coming up on our time, and I like to just be respectful of everybody's time. But I did want to ask you, as you've mentioned a couple of times now, you love music. What? what are you listening to now that's sort of your thing? Like,
Oh my gosh. I'm kind of weird. Like I'll revisit things. Like right now I'm listening to like a lot of like Operation Ivy and like
okay.
that whole era of like East Bay punk kind
Mm-hmm.
of. It's so funny because I went on a hike with it was organized by Shatterproof, the organization
Yes.
Shatterproof.
Yes.
And so I went on a hike earlier today with them. Um, and we were talking about how different times of year we were all noticing, or I mentioned like this time of year is very much like a specific type of music for me. And I said, and then we were saying like, yes. And then somebody said, and winter is definitely metal. And I was like, yes, like winter to me is like Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads.
Huh.
But right now I'm in kind of a Operation Ivy and like Death Angel, very like East Bay, like thrash and punk kind of
Okay.
thing. But yeah, I listen to all kinds of music, with the exception of probably like new country. So sorry anybody that's into new
That's
country,
all
but
right.
like yeah, pretty much anything. Like my son is like really into music, and he's always playing like Little Peep type stuff and like
Mm-hmm.
newer
The newer
names I can't
rap.
even remember. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'll be like, "What's this?"
I
Because
know.
it's like some of it's really really amazing, but I can't ever remember any of the names of it.
So, so,
He'll
so,
like save it for me on my Spotify, and then I have to call him and be like, "What was it?" Because I need to find it so I can listen to it.
yeah, the new rap is some of it's great and some of it's like a real miss. But that was the same back in the day too, right? There was like
Yes,
it was
yeah.
either really good or kind of just like a swing and a miss. I can't keep track of all the new rappers coming out. Um,
There's so many,
there
so
are,
many.
there are, but there's like on Spotify every once in a while I'll put on like Pop Rising, and there's like a lot of pop music that you just don't hear either. That and it's just like
Yeah.
there's just so much music that just gets churned out right now. So to keep up on it all is impossible.
Yes.
So Operation Ivy, and are you like a TV person? You binge anything or?
Oh my God, I watch way too much TV.
Okay, what's the
Yeah.
TV rec?
Oh my gosh. I so wish there was more What We Do in the Shadows. I am like a goth at
Okay,
heart. So like I'm very anything with like vampires and like, like a dark undertone or dark comedy, I'm into it.
okay.
I'm watching I feel like I've burned through everything. And so like begrudgingly started watching the morning show
Oh, my
with
wife
Reese
just started
Witherspoon.
that too.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
And
she.
like I really was like, ah, fine, I'm gonna watch it. And like I was like, oh, like the writing's actually this is really
Yeah,
good.
she's been grinding on that. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, you're 8 episodes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Jennifer Aniston and Billy Crudup and Reese Witherspoon, they're all so good in it. Like
Mm,
it's so good.
okay.
So yeah, that's my jam
All
right
right.
now.
And books. We're gonna obviously recommend your book. Is there anything else? Because I don't read enough books to like
Really?
do
Oh,
this.
I'm like, oh
Well,
my
like
goodness.
I gotta tell somebody something every episode. So like there's just no way that I could be reading that much. It's like it's
Yes. Oh
almost
my gosh, there's
impossible.
so many books that like I have like a list of like recovery related books.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously I would recommend my book, See Swallow Me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tracy Helton Mitchell's book, The Big Fix, is great.
Okay.
Aaron Carr, Strung Out, is great.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Amy Dresner, My Fair Junkie, is great. Hannah Swartz, Strip. Joshua Moore, Model Citizen.
Yeah.
Joshua Moore's really interesting. Like it's I think, kind of like a Chuck Palahniuk kind of type of darkness almost.
Okay.
So he's interesting. Like, yeah,
My
there's
favorite
some.
writer.
Oh,
I'm.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love him too.
Yeah.
I love Palahniuk.
Well,
Like Fight Club's almost like my least favorite of his, but
yeah,
I love
me,
him.
me too, actually. I think, yeah, like his nonfiction writing is actually the best, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Actually, I would say, I would just strike that and probably say Stephen King is my favorite. but chocolate might
Mm.
be my second.
I'm like, we could talk about books.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to read a lot more. It's just increasingly hard, you know.
Yes, it's time consuming.
It's time consuming, and then with work
Yeah.
and the kids, and you know, by the time I get free, it's like my brain is just so mushy that I can't take it in. Like the only time I can really like vibe on a book is like on vacation. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a great. I'm trying to remember. There was a book that I just heard about. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It is Among the Bros. Have you
Okay.
heard of that?
No.
By Max Marshall, and it's about uh, a Xanax like crime syndicate in a fraternity
Okay.
in the South.
Well, maybe I'll give that one a try.
Yeah, I just heard him on a podcast, and so I was like, and was just like, oh wow, like that sounds interesting. It's fiction. Well, it's based on a real event
Yeah.
where this Southern fraternity was like churning out hundreds of thousands of Xanax and press pills, and had this whole like
It's
you
crazy.
know thing going on.
Yeah,
But
I'll tell you, fraternities are they're ripe with great ideas for crime. I was in one, and
yes,
my fraternity was not the most upstanding fraternity at the time.
yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't really involved in any of this stuff, but there was always some nonsense going on in the background. And anyway, um, yeah, so I'll give my couple things today. So music wise, um, I like right now. I'm listening to Maggie Rogers. So she's a singer songwriter. For some reason, she just popped back up on my radar. I liked her a couple years ago, and she's on a duet with Zach Bryan, who's newer country, but like she's on with him, and she's just a great singer songwriter. She was actually discovered by Pharrell Williams, the
oh
hip hop
wow,
producer, and she's just great. Um, and then TV. So while I wish I had something great to recommend, I'm gonna recommend this week House Hunters because it's carried me through this past week. It is unbelievable how I can like zone out for 4 hours and watch or however many hours it's on in a row and just watch people buy houses, right? Like I
it's fun.
I don't get it, but and then my favorite version is House Hunter International because it gives me this thought that I can escape whatever's going on like fully, right? Like these people are
Yes,
literally like up and moving from like they'll be like, "Hey, this couple from Alabama is moving to Hong Kong." And you're like, "Oh my goodness,
yes,
I can move to Hong Kong?" Like, you know. So for a moment, I have that like it's kind of like what we do with Zillow in our house when we're having a really bad day. Or if I'll know if my wife is like a little off because all of a sudden like I'll start getting these Gmail alerts that she saved houses on Zillow. It's like, you know, and they're all like not where we live.
yeah,
So it is very escapist, but
yeah.
it is and there's just something about the house. Like there's certain episodes you can just kind of goof on them with like your spouse, right? Like so like
Yes,
we'll
that's so funny
yeah.
because I watch that with my mom. I go to my mom's house like twice a week, and we watch,
Yeah,
and it's fun.
it is
It's
fun.
it's fun
Yeah.
to watch.
And it's not like heavy. Like we were and I've brought it up on a couple episodes. We've been watching The Bear, but it's very slow watch for me.
Oh
It's very
yes,
intense and I the
it
last one I
is.
watched, I'm like I just still can't even do the next one. I'm like I need a break. Like I need to break from this.
It's so like fast paced too that it's like
Yeah.
it's almost anxiety provoking,
It is. Yeah.
but it's also the alcoholic addiction aspect of it is so like grabby,
I know.
like I love it.
I know. I
I
know.
I really like that show.
There's like a lot of storylines that are just so they hit so close to home and I'm like I just need a
Yes.
break from it. So like
Yeah.
maybe we'll pick it up on tomorrow or something like that. That's
Yeah.
probably the thought. So those are my things this week. I don't have any books or anything else
Have
really.
you watched Trafficking
No, I have not.
with I cannot remember Maria Van. I can't remember her. I want to
Oh,
say Van Helsing, and that is
yeah,
not what it
it's
is.
the like the news show where she yeah, I've watched like one episode of that actually.
That fascinates me. Like
Yeah.
her going and seeing like people like dealing fentanyl or how they make it
Yeah.
just or like going to like just these crazy locations.
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard her speak before. Um, yeah, sometimes things like that really kind of, I don't know. Like I can watch like a 48 hours or like a true crime podcast, but like that for some reason really kind of like I don't it doesn't agitate me. It's more like it's like anxiety producing. I don't know.
Yes,
Like I
yeah,
can't quite
I
yeah.
yeah,
Like I can't watch Soft White Underbelly, which is like the YouTube guy, right? Like that
yeah,
stuff. Like people will go like watch this. Like and some people say to watch it like as an interest and some people say to watch it as like goofing on it. And I look at it and I'm like, "Oh gosh, like it just feels too close to home, right? Like,
yes,
so like yeah, that's that feeling, and I don't,
yeah.
yeah, it's not anxiety, it's something else. It's like
Yeah, I
get me out of
understand
here,
that.
yeah,
Yes, yeah.
right,
There's shows like that that I have that same reaction to, and I'm like, I can't pinpoint what it is, but I'm so uncomfortable. I can't watch it. I can't do
yeah,
it.
yeah, and there's movies like that too. Like at the end of the
Yeah,
movie, I'll look over at my wife and go like, that wasn't for me. Like that
yeah.
was just totally unbearable the
Feel
whole time.
traumatized.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, there was one about like a hotel in Florida. I forget what it was called, but like this family like lived in a hotel, and I'm sure somebody knows it, but the whole time I was like, this feels awful. Like the
yeah.
whole time I was watching it, I'm like, there's no enjoyment here. Like all I kept thinking was like, get me out of this movie, you
Yes.
know?
When is it over?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
well, Suki, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think that your story is super interesting, and the fact that, you were on this path and able to, you know, make the turn, and now 23 years later, you're helping people and you're finding, people ways to their own recovery is really the beauty of the story. And I hope everybody listening goes to Amazon and finds your book, See Swallow Me,
yes.
and checks out your
Barnes and
social.
Noble.
Huh?
So at Barnes and Noble also,
And then
and
some.
apparently at Book Soup in LA now also.
Okay, look at
So
that.
that's what's
All
going on.
right.
Yeah.
Well, your social media will be linked on the show notes, so check that out. And everybody, if you could like, subscribe, do something, I guess it gets more listeners or something to the podcast. I'm still learning all of this, but I appreciate it. And we will. Any last words, Suki?
I just thank you so much,
Okay.
Corey. And yeah, I'm just grateful to be here. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. And we'll see everybody next week.